Right, back live with you, and thanks for staying on. The Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Alvin, says South Africa's diplomatic missions across the globe are ready to mobilize 2 trillion rands by 2028, with a particular focus on increasing intra-Africa trade, which stands at 17% of total trade. He says the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement would cover a market of 1.2 billion people in Africa, with a combined gross domestic product of $2.5 trillion. For more on this, we're now joined by Alvin, the Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation. Deputy Minister, good evening. Good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. One would say it's been a very busy January for South Africa as far as our diplomatic relations is concerned. We saw Sergei Lavrov, we saw Janet Yellen, we saw Joseph Borrell all coming into the country, bringing into sharp focus a question of what is our foreign policy. Analysts have been criticizing this foreign policy, saying, well, we have shifted so much from the days of Nelson Mandela, from being the country that was driven largely by a good human rights record, where we had solidarity with the oppressed, that our need for trade and investment has shifted us to now being focused on economic policy and progressive internationalism. Would you say that's a correct critique? Is that where we are?
No, absolutely not, Tabu. We are true to history as, South Africa. We continue, obviously, to pivot our foreign policy premised on Pan-Africanism, global solidarity, cooperation with the industrial north, and obviously the enhancement of multilateralism. Of course, what is different today than in 1994, Tabu, is a realization that our national interests should, underpin the work that we do in executing our foreign policy. Therefore, we have given an instruction to all the diplomatic missions of South Africa across the world that the issues of economic policy is key and paramount in terms of how we want to advance our national interests, obviously in order to mitigate, unemployment, poverty and inequality. So it's intertwined, interrelated, and interdependent in terms of the enhancement of those 4 policy considerations, Tabu.
Yeah, but this role of being a balancer, where you are seeking to rationalize your relations with both the North and the South, with this principle of non-alignment and independence, to some seemingly has weakened your voice, for example, in criticizing Russia over openly invading the Ukraine.
No, we remain non-aligned. Remember, we are part of the non-aligned movement, subscribing to its Bandung principles, diplomacy. It speaks about the respect for the territorial integrity of member states. What it has allowed us to do, Tabu, is to continue to engage the Russian Federation in relation to peace diplomacy, premise on mediation and negotiation, but equally so to engage, Europe and the US in relation to the urgent need to bring about cessation of hostilities in Ukraine and to canvass the issues of peace diplomacy. Remember, had we taken a different view, it would have diluted our political authority to continue to engage both sides to the conflict.
What has that yielded for us? I mean, in terms of the, I suppose, envisaged goal of increased foreign direct investment into the country, but also, I suppose, the question of being able to occupy leadership of some multilateral organizations.
Yeah, I think firstly, amidst the war in Ukraine, South Africa have, in the last quarter of 2022 been elected onto the Human Rights Council. We are a member of the G20. We are chairing the, BRICS. So it has not necessarily taken us backwards in terms of our prominence as a voice of reason and opinion in the world. And, both President Ramaphosa and Minister Pandor have been unequivocal in engagements with the US, the UK, and other member states of the EU in relation to ensuring that, the peace diplomacy should be championed as opposed to a concentration on the enhancement of the military complex in the war in Ukraine. So I think we continue to regard ourselves as a voice of reason to both the Russian Federation and to, members of NATO.
Yeah. Is it true that even though we've seen an increase in direct investments in trade from the likes of China, Turkey, Russia, and India, this increase is not enough to be able, for example, for us to fund the things that we want to fund? Before I spoke to you, we played a clip there of the man in charge of infrastructure, Dr. Hossein Soramokgopa. He needs a lot of money to be able to carry out these projects, and this has not obviously been enough, what we have been getting from these partners.
Yeah, I think, look, let's first, express a unequivocal appreciation that as we are speaking, the 1.2 trillion rand investment target is actually within reach, and that's why President Ramaphosa in the SONA speech have then given us an instruction to, as we move towards 2028, that we should be able to agree on a distinctive new target of bringing in 2 trillion rand of, FDIs into South Africa. I think the president have done that, given the recognition that we need to upsize our trade, we need to, double up the FDIs in order for us to try to mitigate, on a very low GDP growth rate that we have seen in South Africa, and obviously to be, responsive in relation to jobs, in particular for young people and women in South Africa.
Let's look now at some of the work that you're doing within the African continent. On Monday, the alliance partners of the African National Congress, SACP and COSATU, had a bilateral, and one of the recommendation or observations that came out of that bilateral is this. They're saying, why has the South African-led government not been pushing hard, for example, for the political parties to be unbanned in Swaziland, the return of exiles, and the push for a peaceful dialogue?
Yes, look, Tabu, President Ramaphosa has been seized with this matter, and what I can Parliament, is that the extraordinary SADC Troika Summit just convened recently in Namibia have urged the Kingdom of Eswatini to initiate a process of national dialogue. Of course, substantively, what South Africa are submitting is that process of national dialogue should be all-inclusive. So we have been able to, through the regional community body, SADC, have engaged Tabu, that bilaterally we obviously encourage, our neighbors to engage in the national dialogue processes, but substantively, through acclimation, the voice of the extraordinary SADC Troika Summit carries obviously such significant weight. So we are engaging the Kingdom of Eswatini, but we are doing it obviously through this, through the regional economic community.
Yeah. But is your voice strong enough there? I mean, you seem, we are doing it, but we're doing it within this body. You seem to be reticent to come out and directly criticize, for example, the recent killing of the human rights advocate.
Yeah, look, let me first, obviously on behalf of President Ramaphosa express, condolences to the family of Mr. Thulani Maseko, who is a leading human rights advocate. And we are obviously siding to the calls made by the extraordinary SADC organ, that have said there must be a comprehensive investigation into his killing. Why we do this at a bilateral level and obviously also through the REC, Thabo, is that you would appreciate, for example, during the challenges that was in Lesotho, President Ramaphosa was appointed as the SADC special envoy to Lesotho. As a result of many years of engagement, last year we have seen Lesotho have actually undertaken a process of elections. And the Right Honorable Matekane, the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Lesotho, have agreed to prioritize, further implementation of the comprehensive national reform process. That would not have been possible if South Africa have engaged in a publicity stunt of criticizing, a head of state or of government. That is obviously why, DERCO is called to champion diplomatic processes. So because we do engage in the due respect that the Kingdom of Lesotho, the Kingdom of Eswatini is independent, is sovereign state, and we engage on an equal footing in relation to some of the challenges that is there in the SADC region, Thabo.
And finally, at 2019, I mean, we were sitting at two multilateral forums, one of them being the African Union. Did that in itself give us enough power and influence, at least to be able to push for more trade within the continent?
Yes, look, if you can recall, during when it actually hit the world, but be it as it may, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, under the stewardship of President Ramaphosa, the AU convened what we call the 13th Extraordinary AU Summit, where it provided a basis for preferential trading of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement from 1st January 2021. And you would know, Thabo, this is key and critical because what it presents an opportunity to recalibrate, our economic fortunes, not only of South Africa, but of all other 54 member states that have actually signed this multilateral Pan-African economic instrument. Why I'm saying so, we are speaking about a market of 1.3 billion Africans. Currently, our intra-Africa trade, Thabo, stands, on 14% as a bloc. And this Continental Free Trade Agreement would enhance that capability to 52%. So what we are going to see is a rapid increase on the economic fortunes of South Africa, of SADC, and of the entirety of the continent.
Deputy Minister, we appreciate your time and thank you very much for coming on tonight. So that is Alvin, the Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation.